Dr. Morrison, some job.
Oh, so
we're going to try to get started here.
Are you all
Thank you all. The acoustics might be a little challenging on the recording. So I guess if we can speak up a little bit, that might help get it recorded for televising our meeting. Thank you all very much for braving the heat and getting here. I think despite the weather, this is a very good turnout. Every owner in the district got, and even more owners got our flyer noticing this meeting. I think every tenant in the proposed district got a flyer. Anyway, welcome to all of you. And I think we have our trustee liaison, Connie Keto, here tonight, and trustee Mark Gilliman is here someplace tonight. Mayor Smith is on the agenda to show up, but he may still. And the Historic District Committee members, of which there are 15 active members on the committee, all appointed by the Board of Trustees. 4 of them are sitting up here in these chairs. We wanted this to be we want this to be your meeting. It's a community meeting. It's not our meeting, but we do want to encourage everyone to comment on any aspect of this discussion about historic district. We're here really to gather your opinions, and those opinions will be taken, and those concerns, we'll try to address those, and they will be taken earnestly in consideration as we go forward in developing the historic district. I think that you know our mission statement, but by the way, I want to draw your attention to this little fact. How many people were here last time? Raise their hands. Well, there's a minority of people here who were here the last time. How many people would be in favor of creating a historic district in the proposed mapped district area? Anybody? Okay. Yes, and so that's why we're here, is to determine whether we're going to do more than just application to the state and national register. The mission of the committee is the Irvington Historic District Committee, under the direction of the Board of Trustees, seeks to create an historic district to preserve the character, special character, and historic value of the village while respecting individual owners' property rights. Respecting individual owners' property rights is very key to that. So there are these handouts. It shows a earlier historic district map, and now that we have filed our nomination with the State Historic Preservation Office, a new map has been created, and that's the map over there leaning up against the wall. If anybody wants a detailed description of where those boundaries lie, I would be happy to stand up and walk us through those. The initial 2013 public information forum happened in January, where we shared with those attendees the benefits of a historic district and talked about the geometric boundaries of the proposed district. And we met to really welcome and encourage input from property owners in the proposed district. In that meeting, we featured 2 local residents and nationally recognized experts on historic preservation to discuss Irvington's historical significance and importance of historic district designation by the state and national registers. After a lively discussion, questions and concerns were addressed, and myths and misunderstandings about historic district impact on property rights were discussed. We have the fact handout that I mentioned before, and then there are additional fact handouts that are available from the State Historic Preservation Office that might give you a little bit more detail about concerns about state and national register. But basically, historic district is a source of community pride. Really, there may be a moment where Joe Lombardi, who spoke about the historic significance of the village, there may be a moment to talk more about that. And in that meeting, we also reiterated key points relative to the historic district, state, and national register designation and the impact that may have on owners in the proposed district. And the thing to really keep in mind, and the thing that we can't emphasize enough, is that there's a very important difference between state and national register designation as a historic district. The difference between that and local designation of historic district. With state and national designation, there's absolutely no restrictions that are imposed on any property owners in the proposed district. If we're designated by the state and national, it's a great honor, it's a great recognition. It raises community pride, and there are other benefits that are available that we can talk more about tonight. The local historic district designation might, if you like, if the owners of the district determine it, could have guidelines created around protective preservation guidelines, or even, some communities established laws and legislation that help protect the historic character of their local historic district. But we have filed we filed our nomination with the State Historic Preservation Office, and it's under review with them currently. And so what happens next after that, we should discuss. We researched other Westchester communities that have achieved historic district designation, and a list can be found on the State Historic Preservation Office website. As well, we've made a handout of that list available to you tonight. There are also posters displayed in the room that show, I guess you could say, synopses of 4 historic districts in Westchester that have been successfully established. 6.
Right there, 6 districts.
Over there. And then a final submission of the National Register nomination has been completed. The nomination included updated district map that I mentioned before, which you all are welcome to have a careful look at, and there's also a handout of the map available for you at the front.
I have a question about that. We talked about the boundaries changing to not include the Bridge Street. I can't quite see the new map. did that happen, or where are we with that?
Are you referring to a statement that Bill Thompson made in the last meeting of not wanting to be included?
Right.
Yeah, well, we took that statement into consideration, but the Bridge Street properties, those old factory buildings, contribute tremendously to the historic character of the village. And not only to, just the visual aspect of what an historic district should look like, but also it contributed to the very development of the proposed district altogether. Very important.
I think what's important in answering that question also is when you look at what a historic district is and where we are in that point with the state designation and the national recognition, what we have to do for that nomination process is inventory all the property and items within a boundary and discuss in a narrative why these are connected and what's very special about it. Then each individual property is labeled as a contributing property or a non-contributing property to the overall historic effect or feel or character of the proposed district. And the state, while they don't mandate you include this, that, or the other thing, what they take very seriously, what they consider as an argument, why is this so special? What makes Irvington any more special than any other place, for example? And we, as a committee, had to make that argument that it is special and its historical significance and its connection from the past to the future, what remains of things that illustrate and demonstrate that past connection, current character of the neighborhood. So when you look at that type of criteria, arbitrarily pulling things out is not really part of the process. The owners of Bridge Street will have an opportunity, as will each and every one of you girls going to get to this, to respond to a letter that the State Office of Historic Preservation, SHPO, is going to send to each and every property owner in the district on whether or not you want to opt out or not opt out, whether or not you're in favor of it or opposed to it. If you're opposed, you have to send a letter back saying that you are. If you're in favor of it, you really don't have to do anything. But that is what the process is. That's not our process.
And
that's the state's process.
And the nomination has very strict criteria as to how you meet certain standards that they'll be reviewing. And believe me, the content of this nomination is enormous. It's a tremendous amount of work that went into it. We got filed under the mid-May deadline, and they're reviewing it right now. The letters that Andy was referring to will go out to every property owner in the proposed district in a couple of weeks at the end of July. So we're kind of on a track and being led by the schedule of those who are reviewing our nomination. Let me just flow through and complete what I was saying about what's the content, and then I would like to get to your question. So I talked about the district map and the historical map. There's more than one historical map that we had to submit in our nominations. There are many of them. And the photographic documentation of featured buildings in the district and descriptions of each building or site that is considered to be contributing and even non-contributing, but in the proposed district. And the photographs that we submitted for the nomination are displayed over there on that window wall. You can take a look at that. And if I could ask you a question.
I just wanted to follow up on Andy's answer to that lady's question, which is this opt-in, opt-out letter, because we went through this the last time and all the homeowners received these letters. And so my understanding of it, there's two elements of that. One is the letter comes from something weird, like a parks department. And
the State Office of Historic Preservation is a part of the parks department.
your instinct is to throw it in the junk mail because it looks like it's asking you to contribute money or something. So you need to sort of raise people's consciousness as to what that envelope is gonna look like.
That's what we're doing here.
Yeah.
We actually.
We don't know what it looks like, but
Well, you
you're
know,
gonna
it
get
looked
the
like the
letter.
last time, so, and I almost threw it away, and both of my neighbors did throw it away. So I know for a fact that it's not easily recognizable, maybe
Well,
now that we're in the
what we're going
second
to
time
do,
around.
Ann, is we're going to, the committee is going to send out letters to you, notifying you about receipt of that letter from Chip.
But
That would
aside,
actually come from the village, and there would be a letter
An announcement saying you're about to
saying,
receive.
you're gonna get this letter.
but then the more important part of my question is, it has to do with the opt-in, opt-out, because I remember this from the last time, and my understanding, and my memory is, I haven't looked back at it, but my understanding is this opt-in, opt-out is the way that whoever it is, the national parks people, determine whether the people, the citizens, are in favor of this designation. And so if you opt out, but everyone else opts in, you're still in.
That's correct.
So
And
let's
opt-in,
understand that
opt-out
you
is
cannot
not a good
opt out
term.
as an individual.
It's-
Yeah, you
it's-
can-
it's based
Opt
on
in,
the
opt out is
You
inaccurate.
made it sound like Bridge Street could
Go
opt
for
out.
or against it.
They can opt out, but unless a certain number of the total, you have 160, whatever it is, and it'll say on that letter how many of the homeowners have to opt out in order for them to not
It's really
designate.
not
Have to
that,
vote
it's
no.
not opt out, you can, all you can do is register your approval or your disapproval.
Right, he used the word opt
I know,
out.
and that was a
And you
poor
made it
choice.
sound like Bridge Street could opt out and then be out.
And
you can't.
let me make this clear, that was a poor choice of words. You're gonna get a letter that allows you to vote yes or no. That's it. If a majority actually is 60% vote yes, then it's a, is that this?
It's based on a majority, and you
Right.
don't have to vote yes. It's a matter of whether you are opposed
If the majority vote
or not
no,
opposed
then
to
it's
it.
declined.
The only thing that you would have to do is write a letter to the State Historic Preservation Office opposing being a part of the historic district. There's no need for anybody to send a letter
Yes,
saying
right.
that
They
they're
count
not
the
opposed.
no's.
Right.
But
They count
if the no's are in the minority, then everyone is in.
That's right.
Can you
That's correct.
jive that with, it says here, can an owner object to having his or her property listed on the registers? Yes, an individual privately owned property cannot be listed over the objection of its owner. So how do those two?
That's an individual, that's when an
That's a house.
individual
That's a-
building is nominated.
Not a district.
And like if your building were nominated for a historic landmark or to be listed on the National Register, and you as a private owner of that individual building opposed it, it cannot, the nomination cannot
So
go.
why is that different?
A district is
Because they're
different.
within a district, and the majority of the district will carry the whole district, as opposed to individuals having the ability to opt in or opt out. That's not.
An individual property is different. The process by which an individual property is designated is different from the process by which a whole district is designated. If it's a single property, then you can decline registration. But if you're part of a district, then it's the majority.
Right, you can vote no, but that's all.
And the default is that you're voted as yes. So, in other words, if the majority vote no or register disapproval, it will not go through, and we will not be designated a historic district.
It
so
won't even go to the state review.
If that number, whatever that number is, of property owners register disapproval, it won't then will no longer, our application will be considered moot.
Let me
And
just
it
finish.
includes non-contributing or
Yes.
All property
It's
owners
not
as well,
contributing.
all property owners.
Yes, it
All
does.
property owners.
All
It's
property owners get the letter,
letter.
whether
In the
you're
district,
contributing
yes.
or
In the
not.
district.
Only in the district.
Only in the district.
Only in the district.
Not in the village,
But
I'm just
within
trying
the
to
historic
explain so
proposed
that everybody's
district.
on the same page, that everybody within this boundary is gonna get a letter, whether you're contributing or not contributing. And if the majority of those total people, contributing and plus non-contributing, don't vote no, then everybody's in. No individual can opt out.
That's correct.
That's the
correct.
whole thing is in. So I think people are confused about that for the very reason that this gentleman said.
Well, and that's why we're here tonight, to talk about it and clarify any confusion about that. I just want to finish up a description of what is involved in our application and then what happens next, and it might help clarify some of this. We talked about it, the majority of owners do not object if the SHPO will send a nomination to the New York State Review Board. It's the board that would make a determination whether we are designated or listed on the state register of historic properties. If that board determines that we're eligible, they'll send the listing to the National Register of Historic Places, and then the designation is complete. There are 3 letters that we're going to get. One letter is the one that we were just talking about, and that letter is describing what the process is, and it'll tell you, the letter you get from SHPO will give you detailed instructions about what to do with the letter or not do with the letter. And if once we get that letter and the nomination goes to the state level, we'll get another letter from the state saying that we've been eligible, we've been considered eligible, and we're listed on the state. A third letter that you would expect would come sometime in the area of November, December, and if we get that letter, we should all be very proud, because that will be the letter from the National Register saying that we've been accepted as being listed on the National Register. Anyway, I'm hoping that you can see a little bit of what the process is there. And if the property owners wish to develop any kind of guidelines for protecting the historic character of their historic district, that will be completely up to you. And that will be a local process. It will have nothing to do with whether you're listed on the National or State Register whatsoever. And there will be a community work session next Wednesday on July the 24th at 7:30 here in this room. Again, it's really a committee work session that's open to public comment and participation, where we're going to discuss the desires on the part of the property owners to develop any such protected preservation guidelines or not. And if so, what are the benefits of them and what form they would take. There would be nothing is going to go to the Board of Trustees from this committee without the property owners in the designated district having the input on and actually creating any kind of
the opportunities. You got to show up. Keep pointing.
So you can reference the previous outline of guidelines that happened several years ago on the village website. Those were considered not very onerous at all, and were actually based on many of similar meetings that we're going to have next week to develop those recommendations. Now, that doesn't mean that we have to do that. This is a different time and different people involved. So we'll shape any of that, any guidelines or no guidelines at all will be determined by the owners in the community. So I think that we should probably get to the Q&A because people have a lot of questions anyway, and I need to shut up. Yes, sir.
Are the deliberations that establish these historic districts on file anywhere or accessible anywhere so that people might examine them and find analogous situations to the Irvington?
Yes. Yes, the answer is yes. On the website for the National Register, if you just Google National Register, it'll get you there. And then each district has a summary of why it's significant. And I wanted to put just one thing in context with that, because we have these villages, and that seems like, well, there's 6 there. But let's think of another thing, and that is that all of Lower Manhattan is on the National Register. That's all of Wall Street, all of the Chambers Street, all of Greenwich Village. Okay? Obviously, places like Soho and things like that would come immediately to mind, but all of the Upper East Side of Manhattan, all of the West Side of Manhattan. So it's not that it's sort of like an isolated kind of rare thing. The majority of Manhattan, for instance, is. I'm just drawing that as one analogy. But you can take any city, isolate that city, because we know that city.
Yeah, well, I guess I wouldn't compare smaller villages with that setting of, you know, the Manhattan setting, but, you know, in going into this and studying this, you might find situations that, oh yeah, that's similar to what we have in Irvington, and that would help people establish.
This list is incredible. Did you see this?
Oh, I haven't seen that.
It's the first time I've seen it. Look at the villages.
So these are pulled out of that, just to make them more.
There are some 14 historic districts in Westchester. And some of them are our neighbors, and we've taken their weaknesses.
And I can't believe it, how many of them have been done for ages. Some amazing towns. With beautiful
Some are
properties.
very small. We know Tarrytown is talking about one row of buildings on one street.
That whole main street, yeah.
No.
There's one section.
That's right.
It's a side street and a
Yes.
certain limited number of buildings. So it's not really comparable.
Not in that sense, not any more than it may be with New York City, and by the way, and to Joe's, Joe, I think that you had mentioned you were using New York City, the lower part of New York City as an example. They have a much more rigid review process and laws that regulate what you can do with your property than we would ever find that having.
However, the historic district designation from the state and from the National Register has nothing to do with that. Those are things that are passed by the city of New York and various commissions within the city of New York.
That's
Which should be the same thing here. The, you know.
No, but wait, let me just clarify that, because I think we got a little bit confused there. I'm not saying that all of Lower Manhattan is designated a landmark district, although some parts of it are. All of Lower Manhattan is on the National Register of Historic Places, which is what we're asking to be. Just be clear about that. All of the Upper East Side, as an example, I won't keep going, but is on the National Register of Historic Places, and that's what we're talking about here. Those two things. And the reason why I was emphasizing that is you would say, well, wait a minute, why wouldn't anybody object? Why didn't all these people gather up? And the answer is simply this. I cannot think of a reason why you would not want to be on the National Register. I know that sounds kind of like challenging, but why wouldn't we? I can't think of a single reason. Because if you own a house in this district, and tomorrow morning you wanted to paint it pink and put flamingos out front, God bless. Okay? And you can sell it. You can do anything you want with it. You can put a big sign up that says, or paint on it, I don't like historic districts. I'm not pointing to you particularly. There's nothing stopping you from that. In other words, you don't lose any of your rights to begin with. But then look at the other side. Now let's look at the positive side of that, which is the pride of place. That you're living in a community that's worthy of being on the National Register. Now, why are we worthy? Well, yes, we all know we have these wonderful, charming buildings, and they are. They're just precious, right? We all enjoy walking past them year after year and being familiar with them. But our village goes one step further, dramatically different, actually, than a lot of other villages. And that is that it's a planned community. When it was created in 1848, it was created as a planned community. Most of the other communities, for instance, like Dobbs Ferry and Hastings, were created because there was an activity at the waterfront and there were trails to it, and then housing and buildings were created. And in a way, it was haphazard how it evolved. But this was a parcel of land that there was very little on it. And it was then subdivided in a very particular way that had the 3 pieces of transportation, the railroad, the water, and the road. And then it had the central business district, and then the spines that were residential. And that beautiful piece of plan is still totally with us. It hasn't changed. And it's recognizable to us, even in a subtle way, even if you don't think about the plan. It's there as we walk down these streets. And that's what's so wonderful about being on the National Register, because it's now not just us recognizing how precious and wonderful our village is, it's the rest of the country.
And there are benefits to being listed on the National Register that we can talk about in more detail. They are listed in the facts that we have handed out, and but just basically, it can strengthen the local economy. It can increase property values, and it certainly bolsters community pride, as Joe was pointing out. And it encourages tourism, which can certainly help support our economy here, especially along the spine of Main Street, where the merchants are in sore need of business. And then there are specific benefits to property owners and municipalities. For instance, if the municipality owns a building like Town Hall, and Town Hall needs extensive alterations or repairs, any of that rehabilitation can be supported by grants from the government, not 100% perhaps, but you know, so there's definitely some financial support.
Income-producing property in a recognized historic district qualifies today for state aid, which is still available. There have been occasions over the course of the last 10 years that there have been individual property owners that could get various types of grants. They come and go very quickly. But if you have an income property and that income property is within a historic district, if you choose, you can make an application for grants to help you make various improvements or restoration to the exterior portions.
The map indicates that the waterfront is included in the district. There's been controversy about development on waterfront properties. How would this designation affect that development?
Again, there are no, just being listed on the state and national register, which is what we're here to discuss tonight, and we can discuss anything, guidelines if you like, but we have our nomination before the state and national registers. If we get that designation, it comes with no constraints, no restrictions on what property owners can do with their properties just because it's in the
So it has no impact.
No.
So no impact.
It
Where all of that gets reconciled is on the local level. When an applicant brings a project, a proposed project to the planning board, then that's...
And the height of the building and its...
That's where local zoning, right?
Of the view would be in the village, and nothing to do with it.
There are local zoning laws that have a measure of protection already, and even the architectural review boards that Andy can talk about is a part of our local law that protects the character of our village.
Related to that, let's assume that we do become part of the historic district. Everyone's happy and we all know how beautiful Irvington is. But it isn't true that we can do whatever we want. Because even now, the village, again, can override. You can't put a sign up that, we got all these letters about putting signs up, and they have to approve. So you can't put flamingos on the lawn. I'm hoping nobody will do that anyway. But